Hello, my fellow fountain pen enthusiasts. So I've got another pen review that I want to bring to you today. And I'm going to start facing the camera like last time. But I wanted to review a non-Chinese fountain pen today. And it's actually a handmade fountain pen by a fellow YouTuber. His YouTube channel is simply named JPL. And he is based out of Australia. And JPL's been doing YouTube video reviews for I think roughly about 4 to 5 years now. He's got, I would say, about 120 plus videos on fountain pens. So he's definitely got a lot of information out there. His channel is somewhat diversified as far as what he reviews. And I think I've been following him now for at least probably about a couple years now. Um, I enjoy his reviews. He's very charismatic. I think he has a very good presentation. He is able to speak to his love of pens specifically very well. So if you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, definitely do so. I'll try and remember to put a link in the description down below, so that way you can go check out his YouTube channel. But like most of us that get into fountain pens, so to speak, we don't just get into fountain pens just because we love to write with them. That's the main reason. But a lot of us, we love to tinker with things. We like to take the pens apart and really kind of find out more about the pens, the anatomy of them, so to speak. And I think for him, that's kind of continued to evolve. And he's actually got a couple of interesting videos. I think one of them was him actually like grinding a nib, and I think I watched that video roughly a year ago maybe, and it was a pretty interesting video. And I think that was kind of where we saw him transition into the idea of making fountain pens. Now he did start a Kickstarter campaign, and I've never done a Kickstarter pen campaign, but I did consider investing in his Kickstarter to get one of his fountain pens. Now I know that Chris Rapp 52 did actually invest in his Kickstarter, received one of those fountain pens, and I will put a link in the description to that review. I know that there were some quality control issues with those fountain pens, and that was kind of one of my reasons for holding off on the Kickstarter, because I wanted to just kind of see how this would evolve for him. I think when you get into something like this and you're basically handcrafting pieces of artwork, essentially, I think it's kind of interesting to see that person evolve. And I wanted to give other people an opportunity to share those pens before I maybe made an investment on one of his pens. Now, speeding up past that, so he did the Kickstarter campaign, released those fountain pens, and really, I found out that he had launched some of his pens on Etsy, and his pens are simply marketed as artisan fountain pens. And so I decided that I would try one of them out. Now, this is the pen that I received, and we'll get more in-depth review on this, but this is made out of an acrylic styled material. He has hand turned this pen on a wood lathe, so it's a handmade pen. It's unique as from that perspective. So again, something that I was kind of excited to wait for. But with all that being said, let's jump into the actual review and let's talk about the things I love about the pen and the things that I could do without. See you in a second. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the case that you're going to receive with your artisan fountain pen. Rather, understated case. I do rather enjoy the label that he chose for this case. Really gives you a good idea of what everything you're getting. So as you can tell, the model is going to be Sigaro. It's a black pen. It's made out of PMMA. So PMMA is really just a really nice high density acrylic. Something that they use it, for instance, for shatterproof windows. So it's definitely something that's going to hold up very well with this pen. The other thing that you will get is a writing sample. Now, I think this is really nice to note. The one issue that I have with my writing sample, so I ordered a fine nib, as you can see, I'm showing you here. But the writing sample that I received is for a medium nib. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that this isn't the writing sample for my pen, but my nib does write like a fine. And from what I can tell, I might have either gotten the wrong writing sample or maybe he just wrote the wrong designation as far as what the nib is. Now, this pen, of course, the nib it comes with is a number 6 size nib, and he's working with a Taiwanese manufacturer. And JPL says that he polishes the nib and makes sure that it writes successfully before being sent out to the prospective buyer. Currently, he only has the nib available in fine and medium sizes, but he does state on Etsy that he has a broad nib in the works. So hopefully, he'll have a third additional offering. Now, looking at this pen itself, as you can already tell, there's no clip. It's a very minimalistic or understated pen, nice cigar shape to it. Um, Here we've got just about one full turn, and it literally goes just barely past one full turn to open it. So I do like that. It's an easy pen to uncap. I get a little bit of a close up with that nib. It's a nice two-tone nib. I think it's kind of goes along the lines with the pen. Nice elongated section. I will say this section is comfortable to hold in the hand. The pen, because of the design elements, the actual size of the barrel, to me, it's a pen that can be written with comfortably uncapped. But if you decide that you do want to cap the pen, or I'm sorry, post the pen, it's perfectly works very well. There is a decent sized step down from the barrel to those threads, but the section is so elongated it shouldn't be something that's going to bother you. Now the section unscrews kind of in the middle portion, and then if as you can tell, this is of course a cartridge converter fountain pen. Now the converter is supplied with a pin, so you will receive that. My converter has been a little bit finicky. I think could have play a little bit of role in the writing experience. So when it goes for a while where I haven't maybe written with it for a day or two, then it kind of is a little bit difficult to get it going. And I'll kind of talk more about that in the writing sample. Now, taking a look at the transparent qualities of this acrylic, I figured I'd get out the old trusty bore light and kind of run that down through it. And you can also see some of the machining and all the different aspects from that perspective. This would be a pen that you could hypothetically eyedropper if you wanted to. It does have an inner cap liner, as you can see the ledge right there. It has a decent amount of threads from the barrel to the section, so you could probably put some silicone grease, maybe add an O-ring if you can, and you could possibly eyedropper this pen. I would recommend obviously cleaning out before you do that. Now, getting kind of a close up of the nib. Again, you can kind of see those two-tone qualities. I like the actual look of this nib. It's got nice wide fins, and you've got an injection molded feed. So you see that stamping on it. And again, just giving you some close-ups. It's a regular. It's just a fine nib, nothing super special. Decent amount of tipping material. Here, kind of again a side view of the nib as well. Now, when we talk about sizing comparisons, I actually chose two pins to compare this from a sizing perspective. The top one there, we have the Pilot Metropolitan. And then on bottom, we have the Fully 1017. This gives you an idea of what the pen would look like in its uncapped form compared to their two. And definitely, again, it holds its size. May not be quite as girthy as the Fully one, but it definitely holds its own against the other two. And again, in the posted form, it is very elongated. Now here we kind of see an up close of the nibs. That nib definitely, again, I think it's an attractive looking nib, holds its own size wise between the other two. And then we get a little bit better look of the sections. Now the full one is more of a traditional type section. It's a little bit girthier, but I really think the other one works well. Now, weight 20 grams uh, with it inked. The full length of the pen is about 144.7 millimeters, uncapped 138.9 millimeters. Posted, it is actually a little over 180 millimeters. Now, the widest point of the barrel is 15 millimeters. The section diameter is 11.6 millimeters, all the way down to 10.3 millimeters, the closest point to the nib. And then the section length, he has on his website that it's 35 millimeters, but from the end of the section to the threads, it's actually 28.7 millimeters. And there you get a nice close up of the ink that I'm getting ready to use for this writing sample. So I did have some a few issues with this pen overall, as far as just consistencies with it writing. Had some hard starts, had issues with it drying out, and I don't know if I necessarily completely contribute that to the nib. The nib can maybe use a little bit more tuning, but I don't want to necessarily complain about it. It's a pretty smooth nib. It writes well. I think some of it might be an issue with the converter and the feed just not being able to supply ink to the nib. I think that is some of the issues that I've been running into. I chose just a basic black ink for this pen because it's a black pen. But I mean, obviously, I could have gone with just about any color of ink. As I said before, it's a fine nib. Um, I did re-ink this pen right before this writing sample. So this is on a fresh batch of ink. Now, the notebook that I'm using is a Clairefontaine notebook, like I always use for my writing samples. I did, however, have issues with this pen writing consistently on a Rhodia notebook. And that specific notebook, it's not a dot pad, it's actually a lines pad that I use. I use it a lot for work specifically, but of course, I can't remember exactly. So, this is an 80-gram notebook. It's a high grade paper. So, I will say that paper has, Clairefontaine has a nice glossy feel to the paper, whereas the Rhodia has a little bit more, I guess you could say, texture. I don't know if that's had any issue with it, but I did have issues with this pen writing on that notebook. Uh, I haven't done any smoothing of the nib, really haven't done anything to the pen at all whatsoever, because I wanted it to be really performing in its current state. I didn't want to do any tuning whatsoever to it. And here you see me kind of talking about the fact that the nib does not like all types of paper. I did use it on some cheaper paper as well. And it wrote pretty well. I actually used it to write on a couple post-it notes. There again was just some minor skipping as well. But nothing too necessarily drastic. Now, while I'm still writing, and so pricing for this pen. So this is his larger styled pen. The pricing for this pen is around $51.50 on Etsy. And then you would be looking at $9 for shipping from Sydney, Australia. So I, of course, had it shipped to the United States. So I paid basically a little over $60 for the fountain pen. And that's combined with shipping and everything. Here we see some wetness tests. And here it's performing. It's performing well for the wetness test. Do a little bit of reverse writing. Definitely get, I would say, like almost a triple extra fine line. Very dry. Not necessarily too scratchy. I would say maybe a bit toothy. But again, I think it's definitely a pen that you could use for reverse writing if you decided to. And then, of course, you see the wetness test. And that's kind of what I mean about it just being very dry. I'm going to draw some straight lines. You can actually get a bit of line variation out of this nib. It's not a nail. It's obviously not meant to be used for any type of flex writing. However, you could add some additional character to your writing if you just kind of go slow and give some moderate pressure to the nib. I'm going to draw some kind of squiggly lines, a little bit of fast writing. I'm not exactly a fast writer, but it kind of gives you an idea. Um, you know, the nib's performing very well for this writing sample. And really, this is kind of what I expect from this pen. And why, when it's writing like this, I rather enjoy it because the nib does have some nice qualities to it overall. Now, when we talk about ratings, so I'm going to put down our ratings on here. And of course, the first one we're going to go over is aesthetics. So this is a very understated pen. Again, it's a minimalistic design. I think for aesthetics, I'm going to give it a 4. I think that's a fair assessment. It's definitely not a 5, but I think a 4 is good. The material is very solid and it's going to last for a long time. Mechanics, I rated it a 4. I kind of went back and forth between a 3.5 and a 4 just because there are some minor issues, I think, with that converter, but I don't have any major issues with the pen. Overall writing experience, though, I did give it a 3.5 for the writing experience. Again, not terrible. It just there are some types of paper that it, again, can be difficult using with. As far as a wow experience, I give it a 3.5 as well. And then our overall rating, we're going to go with a 3.5 as well. I think for a first initial launch by someone, I think that he has done a very solid job with this pen. I definitely do not regret the purchase by any means. Again, I think a little bit of tuning I may still need to do. Not necessarily, I don't even know if I initially need to do it a lot with the nib as much as maybe it might be an issue with the converter. But overall, this pen performs well. I would really like to see where he takes this. If we maybe see some other materials offered. I know, his Kickstarter campaign, those were ebonite pens. I would love to see maybe some other types of acrylics used, maybe different colors, and just kind of see what he does with this. He has quite a few sales on Etsy. The ratings are very solid. So I definitely would not steer anyone away from trying out this pen. I think that it would be nice to support a fellow YouTuber, and this pen is a solid pen. With that being said, there are other pens out there, so just check it out. But I wouldn't say you could go wrong with this pen. Everyone, please take care out there. This concludes this review. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.